Controls. Now you can hit pause. All right. Todd, thank you for the opportunity again. Like to welcome everyone. This is the December 2022 professional development opportunity for the Indiana ODP staff. And when I talk about professional development, I think of three things as a coach educator. One, you displaying the ability to continuously develop yourself and help others develop. You becoming a role model, showing some vulnerability and taking responsibility for the charge that you've been tasked with, as well as maintaining a growth mindset, and also having what I'm going to call a self-regulated learning process. In other words, you're going to be a continuous learner, okay? And to get you all acclimated by why this all came about, this guy here, Todd Shealy, he said, Steve, I'm going to be at the IHSAA meeting Sunday. Can you run the boys ODP for me? And I said, hey, Todd, no problem. Glad to help out. To which he said, oh, by the way, you got one field and 108 kids. No problem, Todd. One field, 100 kids. Got it. So that's how we arrived at this. Abby, this is when you're supposed to laugh.
She did chuckle in the comments, just not out loud.
Thank you, Abby.
I liked it, Steve-O. It's awesome.
Okay. And I showed this to Bill Glaze and our boy from Kentucky today, and Derek said, well, what kind of bourbon's that? So just to let you know what other ODP state directors are thinking. So here's the deal. The plan. I had to come up with a plan. I'm like, okay, I got one field. I got 108 kids, got 3 coaches. How are we going to really make this work? And build on what Todd had told me you all had worked on the week before. Instead of sending you all out a training plan, what I did was I sent you out a video. And this is just a small clip of that video. And I'd like to get some feedback on that.
So our focus is on regaining the ball, okay, and then counter-attacking on that. So, for example, if the Yellows have the ball here, Blues, you are allowed to send 4 players into that zone to go and get the ball back, okay? If you manage to get the ball back, so 4 come in. Here we are. And I will like you just to pick up a position in your rectangle, just over here. It's a better position that makes it hard for the Blues, okay? So, as the ball's being played, you're passing around. So just have a pass, just have a walk around, try and get the ball. Good. Just get an idea. Good. Well done. Well done. Good. Good. When you steal the ball back, what do you think your job is to do? Where? Yeah. So now it's you get the ball back, play in. And Yellows, what do you do? Go then. Good. Can you steal it? Well done. Well done.
Okay. I throw that at you because Todd told me that you had all worked on building out of the back in the previous ODP training session. And what he asked me to do is, can we build upon that? Maybe linking the 6 and the 8 together, or the 6, 8, and 10 together. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? It's one thing to link them, but what's the purpose behind that? We want to be purposeful in the training. And I took it to mean as soon as you win possession, how can we play forward as quickly as possible while in possession? So in other words, get it from our half to the attacking half. Okay. And since he mentioned the 6, 8, and the 10, I'm thinking, hey, we're going to go up the middle channel. Okay. So you'll notice on the screen right now, this is pretty much how I set up one half of the field with 53 players. Where the yellow is, I had the same thing duplicated over there. So it was a total of about, I think, 106 players playing all at once. All right. Does that make sense? Does everybody kind of see the schematic there? The red lines are the grids. the 3 orange cones happen to be the midfield line for that grid. The warm-up that I did, I simply had the players knocking a ball back and forth with a teammate, and then I called out numbers, and then I had them get in a group number, and then they went back to doing it again. Then I got them into triplets and had them working on different passing techniques, playing the outside of the foot, double passing, just a lot of things to make it kind of fun and get them playing with their head up, if you may. Who all was working with me when we were doing that day? I think Ian was there. Jeremy was there. Jim was there. Okay, so you saw it. And I know a couple of comments came to me like, this looks like organized chaos. And it was. What was your general impression of the warm-up and the activity itself? And you can unmute yourself. This is definitely a two-way conversation, hopefully. I hope.
I don't have any thoughts about the warm-up, but I thought the activity went really well, at least in the grid that I was coaching.
Okay.
I had players that were pretty similar skill level, so that helped a lot. I think we did a good job splitting them up by skill level because we had different age groups too. And then
Okay.
with the transition, the main thing is I was just trying to get them to play faster after they won the ball. Like the 3 defenders would win a ball, and the 4 would be so slow to start passing. So that was kind of the first thing I worked on.
Okay.
But yeah, it got to the point where they were able to play through lines quickly after winning the ball. So I thought it was effective.
Jim, and Jeremy, any thoughts?
I agree. It's very effective activity. I like that we got into the play quickly. There wasn't a ton of demonstration or lecturing. And from a transition and penetrating once we win possession, I thought was a positive activity. The boys responded to it quickly as well. So,
Jeremy, how'd you like the warm-up? Did it connect? And you're muted. You're muted.
I know. Yes. Hang on for a second. I'm doing this on my phone and it's not cooperating. No, I thought, yeah, the progression from the warm up to the main activity made a lot of sense. I don't think I told you it looked like organized chaos. It did feel like organized chaos, but I don't think it was the setup of the activity. It was just the noise in the building. That was the hardest thing, was getting the players to, like, the video you just showed is beautiful, but there is no outside distraction for the players. So I think the other struggle we had was we're still running into issues with pennies and having players with the appropriate colors and things of that nature. And that was a little chaotic, but the activity itself and the warm up both, I thought went just fine.
Okay.
If I may, Steve,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I thought, and I think you may have pulled me to the side and said something to me about this, but I think I noted it when you just said that the organized chaos was somewhat intentional. But what I liked about the way we coached that activity is we gave them quick direction and then let them work through the chaos in their own game, right? Rather than dictating from the first kick what they should be doing to find success. We let them kind of muddle through trying to find possession and play it quickly. So I felt like that when you say that was intentional, that's what the reasoning was.
As coaches, do you know what we call that? The term? We call that player-centered. In other words, we try not to make it coach-centered. The reason I asked that question is the warm-up, I totally winged it. I had no clue when I got there with 106 kids how to do an appropriate warm-up that would get them mentally and physically warmed up for the activity we were going to do. I knew the activity we were going to do, but how can I connect it? And I think that's the fun part of being a coach, is just like we try to put the kids in an environment where they get to show off creativity, but how can we make it fun for ourselves too? And part of that is, hey, challenge yourself a little bit, but maybe have a couple ideas in mind. Okay. So I've got a couple questions here for you. Why did I use 3 players going in to win the ball versus the 4 that you saw in the video? So if you look at those grids right there, the 2 grids on the left had 14 players. The grids on the right, 13 on the top, 12 on the bottom. Why did I only send 3 players in instead of 4? I made that adjustment.
Let the spacing team find success to gain some fluency in the activity in the beginning.
Okay. That's one of them. Let them get a little bit of a rhythm going. What else? Chris, Janet, Abby, Brett, Bueller?
It provides options for the team that wins it back. Instead of if you have an extra player, they only have 2 to play to if they win it back compared to 3.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it gives them multiple options. Instead of just 2 outlets, they got 3.
Is it because it's supposed to connect to the 6, 8, and 10?
Okay.
So you're playing in that midfield 3.
Okay. I like that. So you may have players in those roles. Remember what I said at the beginning, we had 108 players in one field.
Right.
So what I did was I divided 4 quadrants and then each quadrant into halves. And so now we've got 8 fields by which we're running grids and running the activity. How much space do they have? Is the space limited?
Yeah, I mean, the space is really limited. So if you want the team possessing to have the ability of doing true passes and gaps, you've got to provide them a little bit of space. If you pack, 11 or 12 people in that small space, they can't move. There's just no.
If there's limited space, that's going to create probably limited time for players at this age group. So we got to look at their developmental age. And so that's why that decision was made there. All right. I like the fact that you guys have an idea of why that's happening. Why did I put channels between all the grids?
Would that be to create the parameters for the space that they have to work within? As far as the channels separating the grids, and I'm having trouble with the video right now.
Okay, the channels, I mean this area right in here, like almost the cross, that no man's land between the grids.
I would, and again, I'm getting no video right now, but I would think that the channel, my interpretation of a channel would be, again, you're giving a defined space for the players to play within. And also I think that helps them with their problem solving as far as with the activity goes. It, for lack of a better term, breeds the players solving their own problem and making their decisions based on the situation they find themselves in.
Anybody else want to continue with that?
I just like that. I think it's a good spot for the coaches to stand and observe all groups.
Okay, I'm going to agree and then also disagree with that. I agree that's a nice area to kind of float in, but the problem is when you get that many kids, you may get taken out from behind by a kid that you cut last year, and he's going to do your ACL from behind. You can't trust him. No, but in seriousness, though, those are buffers. They're basically no man's land so you don't have common
Safety
lines where 2 kids are going to come in together and smack heads. Okay, so there's a little bit of a neutral area where there's a deceleration, or you're not playing a common boundary line. All right. In terms of your position, where would you like your coaching position?
Would you like your coaching position off the field and more of an observational where you can see as much of the activity going on as you possibly can within your grid that you're watching?
Yes. And where would you maybe put yourself?
I tend to put myself either into the middle off the field, kind of middle, so I can see up and down the field, or I like to put myself on the top end of the field where the activity is going in the opposite direction, so I could almost watch, in particular if I were looking for that build in the back, where I can observe both the left and the right as well as the up and the back on the field.
Okay, Bob, can you give Dave maybe a glow and a grow maybe about placing yourself in the middle off the field and observing the players?
Well, a glow, I like personally when I coach, I like being right in that middle. I also like being kind of in a corner. That's just my visual, the way I look at things. I can see then depth, and that's just the way I visualize. I like to see depth a little bit more, so I put myself in a corner on that. But I think in a middle, depending on the age group, younger,
okay.
Middle is really good. I think as they get older, out into kind of a corner. But I also, when they mentioned earlier, to stay off the grid, I sometimes like being right on that grid, right on the edge of it there, just especially for communication, depending on the size of your group, how many people you've got.
Okay.
So, yeah.
George, where do you like to put yourself?
Preferably in a lounge chair with a little cooler sitting right beside me, if at all possible. I like to switch from the side and then behind. I like to see the two different angles, so I can see spaces in between players from both sides.
Okay. I've always been taught to kind of hang in a corner if you can, because that way you can see everything, but don't keep yourself in the same corner. Rotate around the exterior so you're not interfering with the play. But if you just position yourself solely in the middle, then it becomes almost like you're watching a tennis match. And while you're looking here, you're missing what's going on over here. And then when you look over here, you're missing what's going on over here. And so if you can kind of be mobile, now you also have the ability to maybe have contact with more players from verbal as well. But again, that's a professional, personal choice. George and I have been doing this for a long time. We both have different desires as far as where you place. But the idea is to try not to put yourself, if you can see my mouse, between the top two fields right in the middle there, where you can kind of get crunched from two players playing on two adjacent fields, even though you might be in a little neutral area. All right, just from a safety standpoint. Why do you see grids where two of them are 7v7, one 7v6, and one 6v6? Why was that set up that way?
Steve, I'd like to think, this is Todd, I'd like to think it was because you wanted to provide different challenges for the players, but my guess is because that's how the numbers worked out.
Well, the numbers, it's 53, so it's an odd number, yeah, but you're on the right trail, Todd. If you get the field with 13 playing 7 against 6, you might be able to manage it where maybe you take 6 of your stronger players and move them over to that grid and see how they do in an underload. Okay, or maybe you take maybe a few of the weaker players and put them together where just by the design they have an overload now, and they might have a little bit more success. It enables you to be able to assess those players. And in the bottom one where it's only 12 players, maybe you take some players that are newcomers or players that you're looking at that are trying out. Less numbers, small space gives more time, a little bit more time to make decisions and execution in what they're going to do. So just by the way you're setting things up, you're allowing yourself to kind of manipulate a learning environment, if that makes sense. I'll throw this at you right before question 5 here. Why wouldn't, in the 13 field, why wouldn't I go 6v6 +1, a neutral player? And again, George, you can chirp in on this because I know this is my little pet peeve, but.
Is it because it's unnatural?
What's unnatural?
Well, you wouldn't have a player that's solely attacking in a game where going each direction. It's they have to, defend at some point and vice versa. So,
when in a game are you going to ever ask a player to only attack and never defend? When are you going to have a kid only defend and never attack? Doesn't happen. So play up a player or play down a player, because those things happen in the game. Anytime you're in the attacking half, you're usually numbers down anyway, unless it's a counter. Or if you're in the defensive half, you're usually numbers up. So get used to it. Anything on that, George? Or are you just happy?
Well, you're good. You're good with that. No.
Okay. How long would you have the intervals last in this activity if you were running it? Abby, how long would you have those intervals?
Oh, that's a great question, Steve. I don't know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Okay. I ran them 4 minutes. The reason being, it allowed the players to get a little rhythm going, and they should be able to create a couple scoring opportunities. And for me, the scoring opportunity was your ability to win the ball and play it forward to your teammates. And to keep a team from being able to do that, you just kept possession on your side of the field so they couldn't win the ball back. And then I gave them a minute for recovery, but I could also then maybe move a kid or two to a more challenging or less challenging area. Move some kids around.
Steve, let me interrupt real quick. And for everybody, Steve's point is something that I want us to continue to do. And that's, as quickly as we can, get likability players going against likability. It doesn't mean we have to read off names at the beginning of the session. Maybe you're just getting going and you're like, Tyrone, send me your 2 top players right now, or Abby, send me your 3 kids that need more space, whatever that might be. So the faster we can get likability versus likability, I think that's something we definitely need to do, because that's what we tell our families we're going to do. So the fact that Steve did that during that little 1 minute rest is probably a great time to do that.
Thanks, Todd. How can you make a game like? And why is it important to make a game like? Tyrone, how could you make this game like? I just gave you a hint, kind of, but.
You can put some kind of point value on the number of passes or the number of times that you transition. I think part of that's important, because if you don't have something that they're trying to achieve or accomplish there, sometimes it becomes monotonous to the kids and they're just kind of going through the motions at that point.
Okay. So my follow-up is, what does it depend on? Your scoring mechanism.
It could be the number of passes if you've held on to possession, or
no, but what does the actual scoring mechanism, what's it dependent upon? Why is it there? We know it's there to make a game like, but what should it reinforce?
The goal of your activity, what you're looking to see.
What is your training activity? So for you to give points for a number of consecutive passes, that's okay, but is it going towards our training objective today? No.
Right, yeah, right.
So it could be a byproduct just to get kids moving a little bit if they're lethargic. But if you look at the field with 12 players on it, pass to the left, pass up, pass to, it got intercepted, bang. We want kids to be able to win possession and play out of pressure quickly, play the ball upfield as quickly as they can. So that's going to take some responsibility of checking over the shoulder, knowing where they are, knowing where players are, knowing which surface of the foot to play, one touch maybe forward, quick outside of the foot touch, going in support. And it's also in this area here with 12 players, bang, this player plays it. What do the two remaining blue players need to do? This is for anybody.
Transition back to the grid.
Yeah, transition quickly.
Yeah, they got to get into support now, don't they? We're moving forward. Okay. So have an idea of why you're putting those conditions there. How can we make it more challenging? Jeremy, how can you make this more challenging? What? Sorry.
1-2 touch.
Okay. Is that a condition or a restriction?
That'd be more of a restriction, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And when you put restrictions on players, then they can't necessarily play naturally.
Right.
Yeah.
Could we play a condition? Could we say, hey, we want you to win the ball back in 5 seconds? Woo! Get after it. You get a bonus point if you win it. So now the red team might start playing 1 and 2 touch to keep the ball moving so they can't get it. So again, you get a little byproduct by you making it somewhat competitive, if you may. Do kids like to compete?
Yes.
Yeah. I heard a quick question on Twitter today, asked if Mike Woodson by a reporter saying, hey, how do you get your kids tough? You mentioned that they weren't as tough against Rutgers as they were against North Carolina. How do you build that in practice? Because you don't build it. They either have it or they don't. I didn't say, hey, okay, boys, go out and play tough against North Carolina. It's something intrinsic, and they need to learn to bring that every day because you're going to play the way you practice. All right. How could we make it less challenging for the crew? James, what could you do here to make it maybe less challenging so that players have a little more success?
Well, you could limit the number of defenders on one side.
There you go. Yeah, something as simple as that. Okay, you can manipulate maybe how many players go in. Okay, and then finally, how does this make it easier for you to assess players? And Todd alluded to this just a little bit.
Well, if you're
likability.
Go ahead, Jeremy. You're up first. I heard your voice first.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say during in between intervals when you're doing coaching points, you can, if you have a player dominating in one segment or one section and a player in another that's struggling, you can swap them out. You can rotate people in. You'll also assuming if you had even numbers in these different grids, you could rotate winning and losing teams as well and try to get more evenly matched groupings that way. So there's, just being creative is probably the best.
Okay. Someone else jumped in right when Jeremy was talking. I didn't see who that was.
I think it was me. It was Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
Jeremy hit on it, which was Todd's point, is putting likability players with likability players.
Okay. How many of you miss a little bit when you put your head down to write in your little books? How many of you have phones? All of your phones have a recording mechanism. They also have a little notepad, and they also have talk to text. While you're out there, just talk in. Hey, number 15, brilliant with the outside of their foot. Looked great. Hey, 197. And when you're done, then transcribe your notes.
Thank you, Steve, for that segue.
You're welcome.
Coordinators, you received an email from me about a day or two ago. Abby, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I talked about trying to, over the next 2 weekends, get at least 1 or 2 comments per player. And as Steve said, you can assign players to your coaches. If your coaches have a certain grid, then they provide that to you, and then you add that into Team Genius. So when we send our evaluations out to our players in July, they've got feedback from December. They might have some feedback in January or February. So it looks like we've been evaluating, which we have, the player for the entire year and not just a one-off at the very end. So Steve, thank you for making that point. And that was without us talking.
You're welcome. The key here is that you want to make relevant feedback to the players. You don't want to just say, oh, they're good in possession or they're good in transition. That really, if the kid's going to go home, what's he going to work on? Whereas if you could be a little bit more specific, plays with the outside of the foot well, still needs to develop the instep so they can play over distance, need to weight their passes heavier, need to understand distance and how much pace to put on a ball, or maybe how to tailor a ball into space. Then they can go home and actually, as George liked to say, practice these things. Because a lot of kids don't go home and practice. They come to train with the entire group and with the coach, but if you want to get better, you got to go home and practice these things. So here's another field. It's all set up. My question to you could be, you got 71 total players over there. So before we only had 53. Can you still be efficient if Todd gave you 71 players on one field, half a field? Yeah, you can. But what you got to do is you got to be organized. You got to make sure that you're prepared and you set up a little early before the kids get there. You can still run your warm-up with your grids already set up, which is what I did. And then boom, the kids just evolved into the grid. Make sure that when you do set up your activities, though, they have context to them. In other words, how are they going to take what you're working on and apply it within the game? There's got to be a realistic connection, if you may. The reps that they get, you got to give kids the opportunity to communicate. You got to give them an opportunity to make decisions, and then you got to see if they can actually execute the skills. Okay, it's something I was going to share with you at the end. So if I gave you 120 kids and we put 71 over here, what can happen on this side of the field? So Chris, what could we do here on the right side if we have 71 on the left and we've got 50 on the right, what could we do here?
We can mirror, with the same drill if you wanted to, or
same activity,
or you can, take components of what you're doing with the 71 as far as linking, short, long, or, individual touch, juggling, anything to keep them active and engaged rather than just standing.
Okay. What do you notice about the right side of the field? This is for anybody. The left side, we got 71 kids training here. Over here, where I got the red little thing that says what can happen over here, and I've said that you got 50 more kids.
You've got grids set up on that side as well.
Yeah. So you can do the same thing, but maybe you put your kids over here that maybe are a younger group, or the younger in that age group, or maybe kids that are trying out that need a little bit more space, a little bit more time. Because you'll notice over here, there's 12 on each little field here. That space is kind of tight, and it's going to ask you to play a much quicker game. So by the environment that you set up, that's going to change it. Does that kind of go with what you're going with? All right. I'm going to leave that one here. Couple things and I'm going to let George come and speak on this just for a second too. I want to stay on task, but I asked George yesterday, I'm like, okay, when you're setting your fields up, what do you use as a rule of thumb? And he basically said, I like to use 10 yards for each kid. Okay. But ideally, you don't want it to be a square. You want it to be a rectangle. All right. So what I've kind of put here, George, do you want to kind of, in a snippet, what you and I chatted about last night about this? Because I've got a diagram for the second point there too.
Yeah, certainly in the, with the younger the players are, that might be 8 yards, per player, 7 or 8 yards or along those lines. So you just got to look at what your physical abilities are of the players that you're dealing with. But it's always got to be in a rectangle. The game's played in a rectangle. Are you working on changing the point of attack? So you might be playing 4-goal games or things like that. Well, then it's going to be maybe a wider space than a longer space. If you're playing more direct, you're looking at shots on goal, but not from crosses, but from central play, then maybe your field's going to be longer than wide. Just simple pieces like that. But and then the question is like, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually with about a half an hour, 45 minutes to go in each session, goalkeepers are added to the fields, right, where we're training typically.
Yes.
And so, and if you have, 8 areas set up like Steve had before, you might not have 16 goalkeepers, obviously. So you're going to have maybe goalkeepers at some stations and some at others, not at others. So there it depends on, what's realistic. To me, if it's 3v3 or less in a space, I always set my goals off of the 3v3 space that the field players are playing on, the distance that age group would be shooting from. So if it was, the 11 and 12-year-olds, shots are maybe coming from, 10, 12 yards away typically or something like that. So my full set of goal might be set off the play space that the 3v3 or 2v3 activity is going to be on that much distance. And that's just for goalkeepers seeing a realistic shot as opposed to somebody pummeling a shot from 5 yards away, and things like that. So I don't know if that's where you want me to go with that, Steve, or.
Yeah. And so what I did was I took what George gave me and I just kind of, and again, this isn't a 70 by 120 field that you have here. What I was just trying to do is to demonstrate the points that you may be working on creating scoring chances going into the final third. Well, those don't always end up inside the box. Maybe you want to play into your 9 and having them drop balls off for the 8 and the 10 who are in blue to strike on the pink goalkeeper. Well, make it realistic. Make the shots come from about 18 yards out, because that helps the goalkeeper on realistic shots. But at the same time, it's also developing your players on how to find that quick window and how to hit the shot appropriately so that you can score. You'll notice that it's a 4-on-6 activity. So when red does win it, instead of just playing to a counter goal, they can play anywhere to the 10. Okay. So basically this is creating chances within the middle channel. And for the opposing team, the red team, hey, as soon as you win it, it's like the same thing we just worked on earlier. When you win it, can you play out quickly and move the ball forward? Because if you steal someone's wallet in the park, they're going to try to grab you quick so they can get their wallet back. So that's why when George and I ever go to the park, I grab the wallet, throw it to George. They pummel me, but at the end of the day, I go meet George at the bar and we're drinking on somebody's wallet. We still get away. I see a lot of smiling faces, so I guess that analogy worked.
That's only if I tell you which bar I'm going to.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. I always got black eyes and I got nothing. All right. So for Abby, she kind of let me know that this weekend with her group, she wanted to work on attacking runs of the second defender or the second attacker. Okay. So here you got Christian doing his thing, but I also see a pretty darn good player standing behind him going, wow, look at it. Look at him go. How can we help those players? So for me, and I told Todd I would give this presentation to you tonight after we're done. so that you have the verbiage here, but if you're going to put together a training activity that's going to talk about support runs by the second attacker, the first thing they got to do is they need to be able to recognize the open space that can be exploited. They got to choose the appropriate run. They got to break away from defenders. They got to know how to create an opening and get opening. They need to know how to time the runs, how to receive a pass. Okay. And by that, I mean, if we win the ball and I see George streaking down the right side as a number 7, if I'm going to bend a ball into him, I don't want to curve it into him. I want to curve it so it's going with his run, so I don't break his stride to goal, because Lord knows he's got about 3 runs in him a game. I don't want to waste any of them. Okay. And it's the communication, and the communication comes from players talking to each other. Where do you like the ball? So on a piece of scrap paper, this is what I want you to do. So Ian, homework time. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I want you to jot down on a piece of paper as many types of run, what type of runs a player can make off the ball as a second attacker. All right. So I got the stopwatch, 60 seconds. Just jot down the name that you can come up with of different runs. $20 seconds. So Abby, be ready. I may call on you as an age group coordinator first. Three, 2, 1, pencils down. All right, we're going to have a little competition here now. Give yourself a point if you came up with a bending run, a checking run, a diagonal run, a hooking run, an inside run, a lateral run. So there's 6. And Abby, I'm going to send this to you so you don't got to take pictures. Give yourself a point if you came with an outside run, an outlet run, an onside run, a sideline run, a straight run, a through run, a wide run, and a through run we also call a split run. Any other runs, George? And we're talking about
overlap.
I think some of your runs are the same runs.
Are you saying I got runs?
I think your runs are a little bit loose. Yes.
Okay.
Overlap.
An overlapping run? So the reason I say this is if we're going to put together a training activity for our kids, do we have a number of examples that we can give them if they can't create their own? Or can we at least identify when a player does well and say specifically, hey, I love how you checked off of that defensive player, came in, made yourself available. Brilliant. And I love also how you checked over your shoulder to see if that defender came with you. Or I love how you got side on and you recognized whether you could let the ball come to your front foot or your back. Or I love how you communicated on the overlapping run. Or I love how you made your run across the back line and broke off. These type of things. George, anything on runs? I know you got the run. I mean, no?
No.
All right. So to give you a very basic example here that I'd love you to remind kids, diagonal runs require straight passes. Straight runs desire diagonal passes. So if you have the 8 here and they're on the ball, and all of a sudden the 7's giving you that run, play the split and play it diagonally to that player. Don't play straight down the line. They're never going to get it. Don't play a diagonal ball. Don't play a diagonal ball into the 11 player when they're showing that they're going to make a run in behind. Make that a straight pass. Is that an absolute? No, there are no absolute in our beautiful games. But it's a general rule of thumb that you can get kids to understand if they're going to split defenders or play between lines or between players, can we make the appropriate pass? Can we use the appropriate surface of the foot? I've got 849. What I'm going to have Todd do, and I'm going to give you maybe 5 minutes on this. Todd, you can kind of help out with this. All right. Is he's got some breakout rooms set up with leaders, and we want you to join those. And I'll let Todd let you know what room you want to go to. But what we want you to do is to just come up with an activity, very outlined activity that you could use that would put players in an environment where they would see space in which they might be able to create certain times of runs, or areas of the field, whether it be an overload or an underload, where they might have to maybe show a checking run or different types of runs. Okay. And based on the number of you players that you have, I think Todd told me that Dan's group has about 30. Abby's looking at 40 to 50. George is looking at 90. And Dave is looking at about 60. Is that still accurate, Todd?
Yes.
So my questions are, how can you get everybody involved? Because the parents are paying money to have their kids there. They want to see them training. They don't want to see them watching. How can you still make it competitive? And how can you still make it reality-based? So in other words, whatever environment you're putting them in, there's a connection to the game when they can go into the game and they can say, aha, I remember what we worked on. Let me see if I can do this in the game. So I'm going to have Todd. What are the 3 rooms, Todd?
So if you mainly work, and I know a lot of you jump around, but so you just choose the 2009s, 10s, 11, and 12 girls, you'll go up with Abby. The 9, 10, 11, 12 boys, you'll join with Dave. And then the older boys and girls, you will join the Derek and Dan group.
What room is Abby in?
It just says I named it Abby Markey.
Oh, okay. Is everybody good? Is everybody doing it? So you're just putting a real quick skeleton. That's why we're doing 5 minutes, so we can keep your time at an hour. We good?
I've got Braden Dawes joined a room. Dave Beck's in there.
All right, so just open up those rooms. Let them go.
They're all open.
All right, so jump in a room, folks.
Hi, Swifty. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Anybody know how to do this on a phone?
That I don't.
Okay.
You can hang out with us, Jeremy.
There, Jeremy, I just assigned you to a group.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
So if I'm supposed to click on something, I've never done this. I've only been sent to a room by the NCAA. So there it is. Okay,
I just sent you, Abby.
Same thing.
Jim,
why don't you help Janet and James out too? And why don't you put Swifty in with Abby, and that way Swifty can say, how are you going to incorporate the goalkeepers?
Okay, we're good. 5 minutes on the clock.
So I will skip the skill acquisition piece.
To make sure
and then just give them the food for thought at the end. So when they come back, maybe we just ask them real quick what they came up with. And then, boop, that's it.
All right.
George?
Steve?
Anything you want to add?
No, but well, I got you though, Todd. I sent you what shapes do you do on offense or defense with the 09 groups?
Defensively, it's more or less a 4-2-3-1.
Okay.
And then in the attack, I want to get one of our outside backs in.
Mm-hmm.
So more of a 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1.
So you drop a player back from defense. You had a 4-2-3-1. So I'm assuming that's a 1-4-2-3-1.
When I'm defending?
When you're defending, you have a 1-4-2-3-1.
Yeah, so 4 backs.
But then you said a 1-3-4-2-1. So that means I understand how that's pushing one back into the midfield, but then you're kind of dropping one of the drawn forwards into the midfield behind if you're doing that.
Right. 4.
And I'm just doing it just to try to come up with.
No, I know. And I know what you're saying. So, I mean, I guess I want one of the backs to get in. So it's a 3 in the back. So, I mean, we could call it a 3-2-3 1-ish, something like that, a 2.
So basically what you're saying, whichever outside back goes, the opposite outside back holds.
Correct.
Yeah, that I got, but then when you have the 3 underneath the 1, 2 of those 3 will get up kind of as wingers.
Correct.
In there as well. So there's 1 underneath. Okay.
So I mean, we can call it just a 3 up top too. Right. I mean, if the 7 and 11 joins the 9.
Right. Yeah. No, I got it. Just when I get to the second to last and last activity, I want to try to get them into the shape that you want them in on both sides of the ball. So
are you missing anybody tonight?
Not anybody I didn't know wasn't going to be able to be on.
Okay.
So everybody did a good job at jumping on. I mean, I think this is the most we've had.
Okay.
Then
you want to keep it about an hour.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
No, Todd, do you want me to send you what activities I'm going to come up with and send them to the people that are in my group, or
I sent them an email today, telling them, that I was going to be out for Memphis, that you were coming in to run some sessions because you'll be coaching the group in Memphis.
Right.
And I would email them on Thursday, the topics that'll be discussed. So if you want to send me any of the training activities or just topics, I'm happy to send that out or share that out with everybody.
Yeah, I'll give you an outline of what's happening with both Dave's. I mean, yeah, and I'll give you the one I'm doing for Dave, because I'm doing 1 for Dave.
Yep.
Right, and then I'm doing 2 for you.
Yep.
I'm doing both morning and afternoon for you on both days, really.
Yes.
Right. On both days, I'm doing.
And I'll be there, and I'm going to be there with you, and I'm going to use this time to start to kind of put kids in groups. So I can start to say, okay, these are the kids I want to see in the friendlies against Illinois, Kentucky. These are some of the kids we should be looking at for Memphis. So that's kind of what my goal is personally when I'm there.
So when we're grouping these, and what I'm assuming, was it in your group that I've got about 90 kids coming?
Yes. Yes.
So when we put them into groups, do they already kind of know where to go, or
no? So once I see what your activities look like,
you're going to make the groups up kind of, and you'll put them in groups, or give them to me and I'll put them into groups. depending on where you are with registration.
And we will have them 90% done, and then a kid won't show or a kid shows, and we'll just fix that stuff on the fly.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem with that. Okay. When we go to Memphis, how many kids are coming?
You will have 2 teams. You'll have a 2009 team and a 2010 team.
Right.
So 18 kids on each team.
On each team. Okay. All right.
That's my plan right now. I may add a 3rd team depending on the number of people that show interest.
Okay.
Only because between the 2 groups, we've got 130 kids. And if we only take 36, I'd like to take 54.
Okay. All right.
And Tyrone, who's going to
close your breakout rooms.
What's that?
You want to close your breakout rooms?
Yes. Tyrone will be there this weekend, George, and he will be your assistant in Memphis as well.
Okay, great. Great.
All breakout rooms will close in 50 seconds.
All right. To close this, what I'm going to ask him to do is in the chat function, well, I'll tell you.
Don't say it aloud right now. Shh, quiet.
I know. I don't want to let Bob know.
I mean, yeah, and you said enough stuff about Jeremy already, so let's not keep picking on Jeremy the whole time.
I'm used to it. I've got thick skin.
You got brown eyes?
Hazel.
You're down a court. Were you guys all in the same group together?
Everybody should be back now.
Meeting is being recorded.
Really?
All right, Bob, why don't you guys, whoever's in your group, they can kind of unmute themselves. Just tell us an activity that you kind of came up with. Just the skeleton version of it, if you would. Your whole group can say it too.
Jim, if you want to go, it was your idea. You were talking about it. I think we'll go with your idea. It's a great one.
Jim, it's the best description you've ever given. Now try unmuting yourself.
Oh man, I said funny stuff. So we talked about putting together an activity that created opportunities to win possession, and then that first attacker who wins possession quickly transitioning to the attack, and then giving the supporting players an opportunity to make those runs off of it. So I think what we probably narrowed down the most was like a 3v3 activity where, again, they're transitioning into attack, letting them get into play and giving them the topic that, or the theme that it is an attacking theme, letting them create their own runs and find success and see how those go, and then bringing them in, highlighting where we saw runs that we were looking for, overlapping runs, bent runs, corner runs, highlighting the players who did a good job of those things. So really, George,
how would you highlight it?
Calling that out, right? So Jake, so listen, guys, today, as we talked about, our theme is attacking. In this, in this first 4 minutes that we've been playing, I've noticed Jake made 2 great overlapping runs, right? Let's, as a first attacker, look for those runs. And as a second, as a supporting attackers, let's be making, let's look for opportunities where we can make that type of run. What are other runs we can make, right? So then get the boys thinking and generating those ideas, and then looking for, again, points to, I've learned from a lot of you guys over time that we can tee up our coaching points, right? So let them find that success, and then reward those who are doing a good job, and then get the rest of them engaged and kind of finding that the topic is the second attacker. Obviously identifying that the topic of the theme of the training is attacking. But then this is where I started to ramble quite a bit and we ran out of time in actually developing an actual activity that included how we get all the players involved in the progressions to make sure it was competitive. So,
hey, freeze. Jeremy, rewind a second. Show me that run you just made. Check out Jeremy right now. Show me that same run.
Yep.
Boom. Plays the ball into James. Bends his run. Ball gets played into him. Jeremy, what do we call that?
Mute.
Jeremy says we call it the mute run. Okay, great. Let's see if we can try Jeremy's run in our game. Go.
Yeah.
So if you can do that within the context of the activity, now Jeremy's running around like freaking Macho Man Randy Savage. He's feeling great about himself. Everybody, for most of our kids now, they're visual learners. They just saw it in action. They didn't have to take your description of it. So if you look at how I sent out information to you all, 2 sessions ago, I sent you a written lesson plan, and everybody's kind of looking at it, trying to figure out what my vision was. The past time I sent you a video so that you could actually see it in action. Which worked for you better, for all of you that got that? 1 or 2?
2.
The second one, right? Because you visually could see it, you can kind of interpret it a little bit. Okay, so don't be afraid to catch kids being good. All right, so at least 3v3 is good, because then you got a pair of second attackers, hopefully. All right, if you've got George's group where you've got 90, think about the fact that you might have to get there a little bit early, and your coaches set up your grids early, or as kids arrive, maybe have the kids help you set up the grids too. And try to set up so that you can tear down from within and morph into your actual final area. Okay. Andy, did you join a group? Andy Swift. He must be somewhere off. My question to Andy was going to be, how could you incorporate your goalkeepers in some of these activities when they come over and join you before you actually get into a scrimmage game with a goal where you need them? So even if you're in a possession game, ball played into the keeper's hands in the air, they can use their hands. Any bounding ball or ball on the ground, they got to play with their feet. So you can get them to work on their mobility, their hands, their foot distribution, all those type of things as well.
Sorry, Steve, couldn't figure out how to turn off the mute.
Oh, there you go, bud. Go for it.
So could you ask me the question one more time?
The question was, within your group, you're the, we don't want to label you the goalkeeper coach. You're a soccer coach. You know how to coach field players. How might you incorporate your goalkeepers into those activities that these people may design, where there may be 3v3 or whatever the case may be, or a possession activity, or the activity that you talked about, where we can get some work with the goalkeeper that is, relatively position specific too, but you still work on their tools of their trade, if you may.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about using like a end zone game, playing through gates to create the different runs, straight run, diagonal ball, and so on. But if you're using the goalkeeper at the back of those end zones and they're receiving the ball, then they're looking, basically they're the trigger to start, and they're recognizing as a run, coming back to receive the ball as a player, checking away, and how are they choosing the appropriate tool to distribute the ball, whether it's a roll or a throw, putting them in positions like that, basically to play like it would be in a game, just maybe they wouldn't have the goal to defend, so you're eliminating the element there of shot stopping.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. I like your wisdom. Todd, what I would suggest is in the past, we let Andy kind of lead one of these discussions, kind of like George and I have split time on some of these. Maybe we invite Andy or another coach to lead one too. So it doesn't always have to be George and I. So got that. I want to be conscientious of your time. Can you see the food for thought? All right. This is really the last slide for you all. And it's just little reminders, kind of a best practices, if you may. Individual feedback's important when it's specific. Try to remember that you need to be able to adapt and change your activities, because you may need to provide challenges for different individuals depending on the abilities that they have. Consider overloads, underloads. Try to become consistent in the terms or the buzzwords you use. Okay, so if you're going to use the word press, fine. But if you use the word, hey, can we hunt the ball? Ooh, kids understand what hunting is, and it sounds a hell of a lot more fun than pressing. All right, so maybe get terms that excite player action, but use them consistently if you can. We talked about player-centered. If you are going to freeze a moment in the game, remember that we want to make sure that it's worthy of stopping for everyone involved in the activity, and talk loud enough so everybody can hear you. Not everybody is gifted with my voice, or maybe George's. Some of you are soft speakers, that's okay. But make sure that players come into you so that they can hear your coaching point on this. And a simple way to remember how to do that freeze is recreate the moment by rewinding it. Hey, everybody rewind 5 seconds. Recreate what happened, rehearse the options, and then restart with the pass that led to the situation. So we like to call that rewind, recreate, rehearse, restart. Okay, that will be helpful for you. All right. Hopefully you found this a little beneficial for you. Again, I went over by 10 minutes. I apologize. Do me a favor, and in the chat function as you leave tonight, if you could maybe in the chat function just give us maybe 2 takeaways from tonight, things you like, things that you'd like to know a little bit more about, whatever the case may be. Because with Zoom, the nice thing is you can print out the chat function, and that will help Todd and myself and George and others kind of gain what you all would like in the future, if you may. And as I said, as soon as we're done and we turn this off, I'll create a PDF for Todd, and that way he can distribute it all to you, so you get basically what was on the slides, like the runs and whatnot. As George said, some of them are duplicated. Maybe you have different names for those, but again, use the consistent vocabulary if you can. George, any closing comments?
Masterful as always. Thank you, Steve.
Oh my Lord.
Good job, Coach. I will also send the video out to everybody as well tomorrow at some point. Thank you for giving up some time. Make sure you thank your families and friends for everything. As Steve said, throw some things in the comments. But again, appreciate you, and we will see a majority of you this weekend. If we're not seeing you, be safe and have a good one.
Todd, one last plug. George and I will be there the next 2 weekends. The third weekend, we're hosting again the 8th or 9th United States Technical Championships. And we do have a special person that's going to be coming in and joining, and that's Amalia Villarreal. Amalia was the grand champion at the Technical Championships for a couple of years. She happened to be the leading scorer on the U.S. women's national team, the U17s, at the World Cup this year. She, I think she scored 9 goals at qualifications and had 5 in one game. But I've asked Erwin to invite her, even though she's 17. We're going to have her work with the young girls. So you get a little role model at their age group, will be pretty cool. So you might want to stop in, say hi. Her little sister's going to come in and compete now, so we'll see how she does. But thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. I know a number of you Dancing with the Stars is over, so it was okay. So, and if you get a chance, Ian, you want to give a plug for your group? What's the name of your a cappella group there?
Out of the Doghouse.
Out of the Doghouse.
Yep.
Bunch of Butler boys. They got a pretty cool video out right now. Mom's awful proud. Check it out.
Yeah, we got an Instagram. I don't know if we have Facebook or anything, but
so if we just go to Out of the Doghouse on Instagram, we'll be able to see it.
Yep.
There you go. The boys got they got their first video out. Check it out. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Talking to you as always.
Steve, do you want to stay on for just like 2 minutes?
Oh.
Oh, yes. I want time with you.
Todd, turn the recorder off.
Everyone have a good evening.
See you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.